You ate fish for dinner at some point this week. Or shrimp, maybe crab, maybe tuna from a can you opened without thinking twice about it. And the ocean you pulled that from contains more than 230,000 documented species, creatures in every shape imaginable, things that glow in complete darkness. Things that have been evolving for 500 million years longer than anything currently walking on land. Things so abundant they exist in numbers that don't fit in human imagination. Out of all of them, you ate one of about 20. Not because the others don't exist, not because the ocean is small, but because something filtered 230,000 species down to a very short list a very long time ago, and that filter has been running ever since, invisible, underneath every seafood menu you've ever read. The interesting thing isn't what made it onto the list. It's what got cut, and why. Start with the first time a human looked at the ocean and had to make a decision. About 160,000 years ago, at a site called Pinnacle Point on the South African coast, early humans were doing something that archaeologists can now confirm from the shells they left behind. They were eating mussels, oysters, limpets, things that didn't move, didn't fight back, and could be gathered by anyone, children included, without a weapon. That sounds simple. It was actually a calculated decision. When prehistoric humans reached the coastline, the rule governing every food choice they made was the same rule governing every animal's food choices. Get more calories out than you put in. Because if hunting or gathering cost more energy than the food returned, you starved. Not quickly, slowly, over generations, the groups making expensive food choices disappeared, and the groups making efficient ones survived. Mussels are free calories. They sit still, they can't bite you, you crack them open and eat them. The math is almost perfect. Now look at the other end of the ocean. A humpback whale is also food, technically. It's made of muscle and fat and protein. A single whale could feed a small community for weeks. But to catch a whale before industrial technology existed, you needed boats, harpoons, coordination, and a willingness to operate in deep water next to an animal the size of a school bus that could kill you without particularly trying. The calories in the whale existed. The caloric cost of reaching them was astronomical. Most of the time, the math didn't work. So, most of the time, humans didn't try. This is the first filter, and it explains why the earliest seafood was always something slow, shallow, and small. But the math filter only explains part of the list. Because some sea creatures that would be easy to catch, that exist in massive numbers, that any human could reach without special equipment, those aren't on the menu either. Jellyfish, for example. The ocean is full of jellyfish, billions of them. They don't flee. They don't fight. They are, by every measure of difficulty, the easiest marine creature a human could harvest. And for most of the world, they're essentially invisible as food. Here's why. A jellyfish is approximately 95% water. The remaining 5% is mostly collagen, structural protein with almost no usable caloric content. You could eat jellyfish all day and barely move the needle on your energy intake. In parts of East Asia, jellyfish are eaten after extensive preservation and curing that takes days and requires specific chemicals just to stop them from decomposing within hours of harvest. The effort required to make jellyfish edible is enormous relative to what you actually get from eating them. The math, again. But this time it's not about catching them, it's about what's inside. Now here's where the ocean specifically becomes different from every other food environment. There's a problem that gets worse the higher up the food chain you go, and it's one that humans took thousands of years to understand, but whose effects they felt immediately. Every creature in the ocean absorbs small amounts of whatever's in the water around it. Mercury, industrial chemicals, environmental toxins. In a single small fish, that amount is trivial, but a larger fish eats hundreds of those small fish over its lifetime and absorbs every molecule of toxin they accumulated. A larger predator eats hundreds of those fish. By the time you reach the top of the food chain, a swordfish, a shark, a pilot whale, you're eating an animal that has spent decades quietly collecting everyone else's poison. Researchers studying this effect found that apex marine predators can carry methylmercury concentrations up to 1 million times higher than the surrounding seawater. 1 million times. This is why pregnant women are told to avoid swordfish and shark. Not because of how those animals taste, because of what living at the top of a long food chain does to everything in their tissue. The Faroe Islands provided the clearest evidence anyone has ever found. Philippe Grandjean and his team at the Harvard School of Public Health documented what happened in communities where pilot whale was a dietary staple. Children born to mothers who ate pilot whale showed measurable cognitive impairment. The connection between apex marine mammal consumption and neurological damage was made precise and undeniable. The ocean's most dramatic creatures, the ones that seem like they should be the most impressive food, are often the most dangerous to eat. Not because of what they are, but because of what they've spent their lives accumulating. And then there's the chemistry problem that has nothing to do with toxins. Sharks have been eating things in the ocean for 450 million years. To survive in saltwater, they evolved a system for managing the salt balance in their blood. And the solution their biology settled on was filling their tissue with urea, the same compound found in urine. While the shark is alive, this works perfectly. The moment it dies, bacteria convert that urea into ammonia almost instantly. If a shark isn't bled immediately after death, the meat becomes inedible within hours. This isn't impossible to manage. Some cultures figured it out. Icelandic haakarl is shark that has been buried and fermented for months, specifically to work through this problem. The result, by most accounts, smells aggressively of ammonia and is an acquired taste that very few people outside Iceland have acquired. Manageable. Not convenient, and convenience is almost everything when you're deciding what becomes a staple food and what stays a curiosity. Here's what nobody talks about when they explain the seafood menu. Culture didn't create these rules. Culture just wrote them down after biology already enforced them. The dietary laws in Leviticus permitted aquatic animals only if they had both fins and scales, effectively excluding shellfish, cephalopods, and marine mammals from Jewish dietary practice. Islamic dietary law draws similar lines. Across cultures with no contact with each other, the same basic categories of marine life kept getting prohibited, avoided, or treated with suspicion. These weren't arbitrary decisions. They were observations that had already been proven correct through experience, then formalized into religious and cultural codes that made them permanent. But culture added one more layer that biology didn't require. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors. They use names for each other, signature whistles that function like personal identifiers. They teach their offspring techniques specific to their local environment. A dolphin is, cognitively, a fundamentally different kind of creature than a tuna. And a tuna produces up to 30 million eggs per year, while a dolphin raises a single calf every 3 to 5 years, which means that even removing the ethical question entirely, eating dolphins at any scale would collapse the population in a way that eating tuna simply wouldn't. The modern protective instinct around dolphins isn't purely sentimental. It's a convergence of cognitive reality and reproductive mathematics arriving at the same answer. So here's the actual answer to the question. The ocean was never divided into edible and inedible by anyone sitting down to make a list. What happened was a 3-stage filter running simultaneously over thousands of years. First, can you catch it and still come out ahead on calories? That eliminated the apex predators before any other consideration. Second, is it safe? That eliminated everything that bioaccumulates toxins at the top of the food chain, the creatures that look like the most impressive food and are actually the most dangerous. Third, does the culture that encountered it have a reason to protect or avoid it beyond biology? That formalized the first 2 filters into codes and taboos that made them sticky across generations. The fish on your plate isn't there because someone chose it over all the others. It's there because it survived 3 different elimination rounds that were run automatically, over millennia, by the ocean itself. The other 229,980 species aren't missing from your dinner. They were filtered out. And the filter worked so well, so long ago, that the result looks less like a selection and more like the only option that ever existed.